Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Neil Rennie Coaching Podcast. New and improved. I've done a lot of episodes in the past, but now I want to bring it back with a fresh look to it. So essentially what I want to do, I'm very passionate about bodybuilding. I'm very passionate about training and getting people in shape. And I want to bring guests on a weekly basis that hopefully will help motivate you. You can learn something from. We can share some information. So today, my first episode, I've got someone who's very special to me. If you've been following me on Instagram, you'll have seen Sasha post up many times. I took her through her first season. It was very successful. We're now in an off-season phase. We're going to get Sasha's take on what bodybuilding was to her, why she started, any advice you can give first-timers, and basically everything in between. So Sasha, thanks for coming on.
No worries. Hello.
Give us a little bit of a summary, I suppose, into like who you are and also like how your first season went.
Yeah, so on the side, obviously I'm a medical student, so I'm training to be a doctor, graduate in July and then start my first job in August. But in terms of bodybuilding, I started really in January of this year and then went pretty much straight into a prep for my first couple of competitions and just fell in love with it. So I don't think I'm ever going to stop.
That was the thing. Obviously, like you were very fresh to it. I'd seen you come into the gym, sort of looked at you and thought, this girl's got a potential to go along them lines, just from basically just your physique and how it looked in general from no real bodybuilding training. So that was me kind of like probably prompted you towards doing it for good or for bad. But how did you what was your driver once I'd said for doing it? Like, what was your motivation behind that? Knowing not very much probably about bodybuilding or the process.
Yeah, I think I'm a really driven person. I love being goal orientated. I've always had a sport and I've been known as, the rower or the cyclist. And I went through a big period of time over, just before lockdowns and then all the lockdowns where I didn't really have a goal for my fitness, side of life. And when you had mentioned bodybuilding and that I'd be potentially, could be good at it, I just thought, this could be the new me. I could be a bodybuilding medic. I love having that sort of extra goal. So really, I would say that you kind of wore me down and got me into it for good. But yeah, I think that was probably it. I just wanted that extra goal in my life.
I think the thing was as well, like obviously I know a lot about you, but obviously the guests won't, that you were going through your finals in medicine as well during all this. So It was a matter of trying to manage that side of things, which was a huge stressor, and then obviously prep and all that comes alongside that. What did you find like the most challenging thing about the whole experience?
I think that what you've just mentioned, doing my medical finals at the same time, I think the obvious thing for most people is to say the food aspect of prep, because that is difficult being so restricted, and as the time goes on being even more restrictive with what you're eating, when you eat it, how much you're eating. And that's obviously a difficulty, but for me it was more the lack of energy that comes along with that. Food is fuel, and normally I'm full of energy because I'm eating a lot, but on prep, when you're not, it takes away from that energy that you've got. And then having to use that small amount of energy that I had in medicine to get me through my exams meant that I really had nothing left over at the end of the day. So I had no social life. I had really little energy to give my friends and family. I didn't have much energy to give myself. I couldn't just sit down and watch TV for an hour and just enjoy life. So really that lack of energy, I think, was the most difficult part for me.
And how would you say you went about sort of managing that to be able to produce a result? Because obviously you've done well in your finals as well. You passed all them. And then we haven't really mentioned how you done, but in every show you placed well and looked very much the part. So how did you go about managing that to get that result on both ends over the line?
I think it was trial and error. I struggled to start with managing that lack of energy, managing the training, the cardio, doing my revision. I really struggled. But towards the end, I kind of learned, I have this finite amount of energy. I have these sort of resources at hand, and it's using those in the most appropriate way. So I knew that I was a morning person. My energy came in the morning. So I would wake up at sort of 4:30, 5 o'clock, get an hour of work done before doing my training to then go back and finish off work. I knew that my energy ran out about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's kind of like prioritizing what you need to get done and just being really strict on yourself and actually doing those things. But also it's using that energy on, your priorities. So my priorities back then was, medicine. Medicine's always been my number one. And then bodybuilding came second for that short period of time during prep. And then after that was myself. And then after that was my family and friends. So actually it meant that, my priorities were totally different to what they are normally. I would normally say number one is myself and number two is family and friends. But it's having to change all of that and use that amount of resources on each of your priorities. Right. So I think it is definitely trial and error. And towards the end, I kind of managed that a bit better than I did at the start.
I think that you make some excellent points there. And essentially, like, it is all a learning curve, and we bounce back and forth a lot on certain points like that. I think one of the main things is when you have energy, do the things you need to do and what is the top of your priority then. Because, if we leave things to later in the day or we put things off, often they don't get done or they don't get done very well. And I think that's a large part of prep, especially towards the back end of it, when things like ultimately do get sticky. If it's not hard, you're probably not lean enough at that point. I think there's an acceptance that there's a degree of sacrifice to a degree and an acceptance of a level of pain. As much as that does not sound appealing, there is an appeal in it. I certainly found, with yourself, doing things in the morning, getting them out of the way, and then understanding that towards the back end of that day, it was a matter of just trying to take the foot off the gas and alleviate stress, because we weren't particularly productive at that time. But also knowing that then priorities at certain points had to shift when you were going through your finals, because bodybuilding couldn't be the priority because it is going to pay your bills. But being a doctor and something you work for was more important at that time. So it was just programming and periodizing them moments in, I think, was a big part.
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like you put that a lot more eloquently than I did, but no, that's exactly it. But it's difficult. I say that I learned these things as I went on, and I think every person does, especially as a first timer. You really don't know what you're getting into until you're in the middle of it. And yeah, it's just a case of you have to manage all these things, but also enjoying it as you're going through. We do this, and you're saying, accept a level of pain, and that's so true. But I feel like we're the special breed of person that actually enjoys that pain. We enjoy getting more out of life, I'd say. So it's, having to make those sacrifices, but also enjoying doing it.
I think, again, for sure, it's because when we talk about bodybuilding and how hard it is and sacrifice and so on, we can make it sound very negative. But there also is a reason why we are doing it or have chosen that particular route. For you, what do you feel was like the main driver when you were doing this? Was it just solely the challenge? Was it being competitive? What was it to you?
I think for me, given my background, I go quite a lot into detail about it on my Instagram, but I won't go into so much detail at the moment. But given that background, for me, it was having the sort of power over my mind and my body, knowing that they don't control me, knowing that I control them. And that really was my driver throughout.
Like, can you talk just an idea of what you're kind of getting alluding to?
Yeah, okay. Well, in terms of my sort of mental health, I have bipolar disorder. I was diagnosed with it in December last year, and sort of struggled throughout my life with it. And really, I found that my mind controlled me for 26 years. Prep gave me this outlook that actually I can control my mind. I've got power over it. I can do the things I want to do. I can be the person I want to be. It just takes a hell of a lot more effort than most people, I think, are willing to put in. And then in terms of my physical health, I've sort of always struggled with my food quite a lot. My weight has been massively up and massively down, really fluctuating all over the shop. And again, it was looking at that of actually, I have power over that. I can change it. And seeing the progress every day. Yes, it's difficult, and yes, you have to put in a lot of effort into that sort of dieting, but you can change it if you want to.
I mean, that's exactly it. And I think for me as well, with clients, and especially the level that we work on, it's that degree of complete and utter self-mastery. And that's something we tried to drill in, is like, that is your prize. Like, yes, the trophy was nice too, don't get me wrong, but the prize is self-mastery. And it's something that I allude to a hell of a lot throughout that, is like, you have full control of your mind, you have full control of what you put in your body. Well, most people have full control of their mind, obviously, again, at a point until you get managed with that. Maybe we didn't, but what tends to do bodybuilding is give people that seek routine and seek that structure somewhere to put that energy. You know, we're all fairly driven. We all have our reasons for doing things. And I think that overall self-mastery, that you are in control of your future, your present, is so important, and probably not talked about that much because people look at it and go, well, Sasha had abs, Neil had veins running through his glutes, but it's what that offers on the side. And yes, again, that picture is fantastic, but it's what you get from it really is why the process is so fulfilling.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I look at those photos of myself, say from the photo shoot, and I don't really look at them in terms of, yeah, I look amazing, I've got a great physique. I look at them as in, wow, look what I did before that time to get to that position. You know, I think a lot of people say bodybuilding is mostly about the stage, it's about winning and showing what physique you can get into, but I totally disagree. I think it's the entire process. You're right, it's the self-mastery of it.
If you could pick one point from that whole process, like what was your most, I suppose, enjoyable moment from it? What was the bit you went, fuck, that was it when it was finished and you got to eat that big cookie? Or what was it?
Unfortunately, it wasn't the end when I got to eat that big cookie because I was sort of done by that point anyway. Really, I think it was the photo shoot. You know, I think it was a couple of weeks to a month before I actually stepped on stage. And that's when I really saw those photos and looked at myself in a massively different light. Again, not because of the physique that I managed to create, but because of the confidence I was showing, because of the actual way that I enjoyed the day. It was a celebration of what hard work had gone in before that. But yeah, the stage was amazing as well. And again, it's another sort of celebration of all the hard work that you've put in. So I'd say it's a toss up between the photo shoot and actually the days on stage.
I mean, I could see, like, that's what I do a lot with clients as well, is get a photo shoot a few weeks beforehand. Because I think so often it's so easy to like put yourself down or maybe not realize just how far you've come. And, you know, even with like lifestyle clients, like I do that, that's where I push most people to go towards, whether they've got abs or not, it's what they've taken from it and that improvement. And often it's when you look, like when you've seen the photo of you in your blue shorts with a six pack, when I showed you it, your face lit up, it was nearly this like, okay, I've got this. And what it does is instill a huge amount of confidence there as well, going forward into probably a more stressful situation where everybody's looking at you on stage. Like for me, that was a big turning point within that prep where we thought, okay, we've got more than possibly you thought initially.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's an element of a bit of body dysmorphia in everybody. You know, you can look in the mirror and quite easily not see the shape that other people see in you. But there's something about a photo shoot or, you know, getting on stage and seeing those end result pictures actually changes your mind about the entire thing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, most definitely. Like even when it comes to, if we look at what was the more challenging points in prep, like is there any days that you can remember? Because I feel like sometimes actually when you look back in them, that's always the big victory too. It's the looking back on those days where, Jesus, they were rough. You wanted to quit, but you didn't. That's a positive in some way, but at the time it doesn't feel like it. So is there any moments, I suppose it gets negative again, but you could pick out and go, that was rough, but I overcame it?
Many. But actually, you're right. Like I'm looking back and I'm smiling because actually getting through those was, you know, such an accomplishment. There was one day, I do remember, I was in the gym. There's a little back office in our gym with a sofa in it, and I was lying on that sofa, and I remember having complete sleep paralysis. So I wasn't fully asleep, I wasn't fully awake, and I was completely unable to move my body. You know, if I wanted to, I could not move my arms. It was pretty terrifying. And at the time I thought, this is just becoming too much for me to handle right now. I just couldn't continue. It would have been super easy at that time to think, you know, actually at this point I can afford to have a cookie, or I can afford to just have some extra carbs. But I didn't. I kept pushing. I kept going through it. And luckily I didn't have too many more episodes of the sleep paralysis, because that really was quite scary. But yeah, I didn't stop. And there was another couple of times in between my shows, I think in between the second show and the last show, we had a couple of weeks in between those two. And by that point, I think I was mentally checked out. I had completely decided, right, this is it, I'm done. And I think there does come a point for everybody where they think I've had enough, like mentally and physically. Actually, it still went past that barrier, and I kept pushing for the last competition. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. And it did come with some, at the time, some difficulties. I was in the gym, I was crying, I was breaking down, I couldn't cope with my day-to-day life, but I still kept going. And it's just bizarre the amount of power you can show, you can demonstrate really during that time, the fact that you can get through really anything.
I mean, I remember at that time, and I was fairly keen for you not to do that last show. It was under a lot of particular circumstances, of which I said, right, well, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it this way. And I think it was something that because you have that drive, it was something that you were going to want to do regardless. And it probably would end up being a falling out if I'd have said and pulled the plug on that at the time. Because I know this, I was exactly the same. I think that on reflection, potentially it was just too long a break between shows. And I think that's another thing that really important actually for any first timers is like, you want to do enough shows to feel like, all that dieting was worth it because you're in condition. However, it's knowing how far you want to go with that. I know my last 2-week holdout between my shows just past there, that was, again, the most challenging point for me because realistically, did I want to do it? Probably not, but could I let myself down? That's where I fell on. And I think maybe going forward, it's something that we obviously look at, and it's something that I'll pay much closer attention to with clients, because I think when you're done, you're done. I think your body will tell you for one, but for the most part, it's your mind. Because as you say, your body can go to places and you find it out during a prep that you didn't imagine even possible. Your mind will go first. And once that's gone, what is the point? And we're amateurs at the end of the day. We're doing it because we love it. We want to see that, and you need to get something from it. Now, I think when you got there in the last show, you still enjoyed it. But I feel now on reflection, if we'd have finished it on the second show, we could have all been more than happy.
Maybe. I was really happy I did that last show. Looking back, I wouldn't have changed it at all, but I completely agree that last couple of weeks when you were saying, I think we're done at this point, for me, it was more, I was upset about the process. I was mentally checked out, physically checked out, but I would be more upset if I quit, because I am so far from a quitter that I just associated pulling out of that last show with a bit of a failure. It wasn't. And actually recognizing your own limits is very important in bodybuilding. I didn't quite master that and I pushed past my own limit. But actually looking back, I'm glad I did. I'm glad I did that last show because I got to celebrate with everybody. And it really was just a last celebration of everything that I'd done. So I was, very glad. But maybe next time we'll do 2 shows rather than 3.
I totally get that too. I'm on board with that. With my Belfast show was the best experience, but it was the hardest one to get to. And maybe again, that was the reward of such a hard push. So from an athlete's mindset, we always want more. And I suppose it's a job of both of us in general to go, right, do we need more? But I feel that at the end of the day, we got a place in the game, and it was just an excellent result. And it was another very good look, probably not the best look you produced. You've done 3 shows. Which one, if we're talking about federations and first timers going into those federations, if they were looking for, right, I'm going to pick that show, which one did you enjoy the most and why?
I had PCA I had PCA first timers and then FitX and then another PCA show. I enjoyed the PCA ones more. I think they are run slightly better, and I do think they focus on their athletes more. The FitX show in the middle was great, and I think I preferred my look for that day, despite being covered in glue because I had a mishap with the glue bottle right before stepping on stage. But I did enjoy my package that I brought for that day. But actually, in terms of the shows and in terms of running, I do think PCA was the best one that I did.
Yeah, I agree. I thought the PCAs were well ran, but the middle show, if you want to go and look, actually, be on my Instagram, it'll be on Sasha's, each of her show pictures, that was the best show. And again, I feel the reason for that is because we collect data throughout. We knew after peaking for the first show, kind of how we could improve and beat that look on the second show. And essentially it was come in tighter. And I think that's the thing is like within each federation, there is certain criteria to hit. And Sasha, for all she trained for all of 6 months, you put a lot of muscle tissue on. and nearly within 6 months, which is the unfortunate thing with bikini, outgrew the division. So I wanted you coming in looking, because on my bad again, because I didn't quite understand what bikini was after. I was treating you like a bodybuilder. I wanted you big. I wanted you hard. And that wasn't what they were looking for. They were looking for slightly less muscular, but still with condition. And I think that FedEx show, what we done was essentially pull water slightly more and go a little bit tighter, dehydrated and smaller overall, and actually even change your posing a little bit to make you look smaller.
Yeah, no, we did exactly that. And I don't think that's your bad at all throughout, because I didn't know what I was doing either. Like, I hadn't watched any bodybuilding, and I didn't really watch any bodybuilding until stepping on stage and stepping off stage. So I didn't really know what they were looking for either in terms of bikini. And yes, on reflection, I might have been a bit too big for that, and not too big for that, but just the wrong shape, the wrong types of muscle. And I think throughout prep, I wanted to get bigger as well. I was thinking, I just want more muscles. I want to be as big as possible. And although that didn't fit maybe what they were looking for so much in the bikini division, that's what I wanted. And I looked my possible best on stage. So
ultimately, that I felt I just wanted to bring you in as best as you could possibly look, because I think with your mindset and with most people, let the judges judge whatever they want, and you be what you see as your ideal image of yourself and what you've worked for. And I think that's really what you've done. And I also like your training intensity brought about a huge amount of muscle tissue, because Sasha, if you haven't seen her in the gym, she can go hard. And we really worked on that intensity, but also alongside intent. And we were having to work around hip, knees, all sorts of things, but we managed it, and we put a lot of muscle on very quickly. But I think throughout that prep, we realized, well, Sasha's going to be pretty big for this division. And I think that's probably changed. Well, I know it has, because obviously I'm coaching you, but for the viewers, that's changed your direction in terms of like where you're wanting to do, what you want to do now going forward in the future. If you want to talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, I haven't really kind of opened up about that too much. I've just said, I'd like to compete at the back end of next year. But ideally, what fits with what I want from a personal physique point of view and from a bodybuilding point of view, I love wellness as a category. They focus quite a lot on your quads, on your hamstrings, your sort of lower half development. And I personally prefer that look. And I think it suits my shape quite well. So the idea now is to have quite a successful off season before entering a prep sort of mid next year, to then compete at the end of next year. I would eventually like to do a 2 brace show. That's quite a step up from what I've competed in so far. But again, that takes a hell of a lot of muscle tissue. So it's really a case of seeing how this off season goes, seeing how much we can push it in terms of my leg training. And especially as I've had a hip operation a couple of months ago,
That's just a challenging one, doesn't she?
Yeah, I do come with a lot of issues. It has been difficult, but we have set up so far as best we can to start this off season now. So it's just a case of watch and see how it goes, and then hopefully compete in wellness.
There's absolutely no doubt we will get there. I've no doubt, and you and myself as a coach. So now that we're touching on it, actually, let's talk about the off season. And I think that's actually where most people fall down. I think from my experience of it all now, within a prep, we can be laser focused. It's the off season that becomes more challenging, possibly because body image starts changing. You're not getting the same affirmation from people going, wow, you're lean. It's just like, whoa, are you still training, or are you just eating everything? And especially as a female, again, I would mostly coach, probably 80% of my clients are female. So I know for them, it's probably more difficult to have that weight gain just because of potential societal pressures compared to a man. If I put a lot of size and was like, you look big, but sometimes that's harder to accept as a female. How have you found it so far, and what are your thoughts going forward in dealing with that? And again, for the viewers, how do you feel some good tactics to work through that?
It has been difficult. I'm not going to lie, this last couple of months, watching the weight go up and then stabilize, and then go up a little bit more and stabilize again. And as well with the operations in the mix of that, I have fluctuated so much. And it is hard. I look at myself in the mirror and I don't see that lean person anymore. I don't see quite as much muscle tissue because now it's, covered in a bit of fluff. And you're right, you don't get those affirmations from other people saying, oh my gosh, wow, like look at your abs, and you can't just lift up your t-shirt and flash your abs at anybody anymore, unfortunately. But it's a case of, instead of viewing your body how you did before bodybuilding, it's now looking at it as a tool to then get you to stage. So previously I'd look at my body and think of, attractiveness and confidence and associate a bit of my personality with my body. But now I've very much removed that. So I don't associate my self-worth with really how my body looks anymore. And I see my body as a tool for, enabling me to get to stage again. And it is hard. I still struggle with it. And especially as my body weight is still going up and will continue to go up, I think those struggles will continue. But a few tactics for doing that is really, I'm a big fan of mindfulness and, positive affirmations, and looking at yourself in the mirror. And instead of pointing out all the areas that you don't like about yourself, just point out 3 good things that you like about yourself in the morning, or say some positive affirmations over and over of, yes, I don't look how I would really ideally like to look, but actually think about the stage, think about that end goal of what you want. It is difficult, and, I will keep everybody updated on how it goes. But yeah, I guess just keep up those affirmations and keep realizing that your body is a tool for bodybuilding rather than a piece of your self-worth.
Completely. And I think it's obviously even detaching yourself from that point in prep as well, where you do start to see your self-worth through what you're working towards. All this is much easier said than done, and I think it takes practice. And the more you do it, the more experience you gather within that process, and it's easier to detach that. And it's understanding as well that you do not look bad, you do not look fat, you're in full control, you have self-mastery over every element of that as well. That you are choosing to do that because you can where others couldn't. And that's something I drive home as well. It's the mindset, like you talked about, that you approach this time with, whether it be diet, whether it be off season, whether it be not training, when you've had to have that layoff. It's how you view yourself is ultimately what's the most important factor in all this, knowing that you have full control over every bit of that. And I think it's something that you are managing well, but again, through experience, you'll learn to manage it better, because this isn't for you. I know, obviously knowing you, this isn't like, I'm going to do this for 6 months, I'm going to do this for a year. It's something that you want to incorporate in as part of your life going forward. And that's why, knowing that you'll give it the time, I have no doubt you'll see plenty of success in it.
Fingers crossed. Watch this space.
Right. I want to end this with, if you were given some advice to first timers thinking about competing, thinking about getting a coach, what would you say?
In terms of getting a coach, I think try and find somebody that your goals align with theirs. And I do think there needs to be an element of a personality match. With yourself, with me, we became friends throughout this entire process. And I think if that's not possible, then, you don't trust your coach so much. And that really needs to be, at the top of your mind, being able to trust the process, trust what your coach is telling you. So yeah, picking a coach is really important, but just finding somebody whose goals align with yours. In terms of advice for first timers, like going through a prep, try not to overthink things. I'm a massive worrier, massive overthinker, and every little decision becomes, a big thing in your life, whether it's, what time you train, what time you eat, because everything is governed. Everything needs to be so on point in order to, for it to work. But actually, if you have a good coach, going back to the coach, then they can take that away from you. They make the decisions. So put your trust in them, listen to them, and just go with it.
I think it's so important. I have a coach myself, and it takes that stress factor out of it. There's still stress, but it takes it out of it to a degree, because the decision is no longer in your hands. You're an athlete, you're a robot, behave accordingly, essentially. But Sash, I really appreciate you coming on. If you don't follow Sasha, go and follow her on her Instagram. She talks a lot. She talks plenty. She gives a lot of good advice as well. her own experience of it. If you don't follow me, why not? Get on Neil Rennie Coaching and hit me up. This is something I plan to do now on a weekly basis. And as well, next year, I'm launching my own coaching business as well, which Sasha is going to be a part of and be on board with as well, in terms of helping girls pose, helping with hair and makeup, because, you know, clearly I have no idea what I'm talking about with that side of things. It's really good to have another female I find on there. So Sasha will be part of that. If you're interested in getting set up or started in that, obviously give me a shout. But yes, thanks for listening. Do the usual, like, subscribe, share, and all that. And this will be up on YouTube on a weekly basis. So cheers, guys. Thanks for listening.
Bye. Thanks.